In the Wild West world of podcasting, where podcasts are dominated by hosts who deliver a below-average product, and each unlistenable podcast is trying to be like the next, there is one podcast that is authentic and genuine and continues to stand tall in its originality. Based on a passion for his guests, their work, and his love of podcasting, Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast get amazing, diverse, unique guests found nowhere else. They include Hall of Fame athletes, Academy Award winners, Golden Globe winners, Super Bowl champions, Emmy winners, award-winning authors, award-winning film score composers, directors, trailblazers, pioneers, and inventors. The variety and quality are endless. There is something for everyone. Derek Thomas is the hero you deserve. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
Welcome to episode 145 of the Monday Morning Critic. Today's guest is composer Tony Anderson. I'm going to tell you today's intro to the podcast is a little bit longer because I really feel you need to kind of get a sense of how special Tony's music is. I'm going to leave you with a 3 or 4 minute longer intro. It's going to be Tony's song, Eyes Wide Open. It's worth every second. And if this song doesn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, then you might want to check for a pulse. I absolutely love this interview. Professional Tony's as talented as they come. Personally, a very solid human being. Like I said, not to be redundant, I absolutely love this interview. And what I love most about Tony, outside of his phenomenal talent, is his appreciation for film scores, his appreciation for composing, his respect for fellow composers. You don't always see that, whether I'm talking to an actor or an athlete or whatever. You don't always see the respect go this far. But Tony's just a stand-up human being. Without further ado, here's the very talented, the very kind Tony Anderson. Please enjoy the interview and Eyes Wide Open. My next guest is a special and gifted musician / composer. Please welcome the very talented Tony Anderson. Tony, we finally get to do our interview. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Man, thank you for having me. I am sitting in my backyard right now with a glass of Skin Contact Marsanne from Columbia Valley, Washington, and I'm loving life, and I'm really honored that you asked me to have this conversation. Thank you.
No, you're a very talented and special musician. So I have to ask you, what is that you're drinking? I've never heard of it. And I'm probably
God, I
naive
just realized,
here.
I just realized how bougie I sounded, how entitled I sounded by saying that. It's really just a great white grape varietal that is native to France, and Washington has great soil and great temperature for growing a lot of varietals. So does Oregon, and so does California, but Washington in particular has great soil and latitude and longitude for growing a lot of varietals that are native to France. And this is a white wine, but it's got skin contact in the winemaking process, which means normally when the skins are removed out of the vat, the juice ages and it takes on the flavors of the barrel or the cement vessel or whatever. The skin contact means you leave the skins in the barrel. They usually rise to the top, and it gives an acidic, earthy, kind of yeasty taste to it. So without being overly bougie, it's good peasant wine with a little bit of kick. Millennial kick, I should say.
It sounds like a good drink. And I have to say, speaking of, interesting things, I'm looking at your life here. You have a pretty big family, right? Family of 7, if I'm looking at my research correctly.
I do. I love my family. There's 7 of us. Yeah, I'm one of 5. Big and wild, man.
So how many of them went down the musical / art road the way you did it? Are you the only one? Are you one of a few?
Oh, I am definitely not the only one. I'm actually, and I really mean this with all due respect, I'm the least qualified and least talented person to be creating art in my family. I am second in line. My older brother, Chris, lives in Boston. He's a kick-ass drummer, unbelievably precise with how he thinks through drums and percussion and time signatures. He's actually moving here to LA, even a couple blocks away from me, and I'm excited to finally collaborate with him. And he's a genius photographer. My brother David did woodwinds growing up when he was in elementary and middle school, and I think a little bit into high school. And he left it. I think for him, he wanted to pursue a lot more than music. And it may have been the context in which we were all raised in Central Florida. Maybe there wasn't enough opportunity. I love David. The way David thinks through film and music, his intuition, especially when he tells me if I'm working on something that stirs him, I know if David says it, he means it. Under him, beneath him in terms of age is Ben. Ben's living out in Boulder right now and has recently been pursuing his PhD in French horn. And then Sharon, the youngest of us, my sister, actually played trombone, which she's probably going to hate hearing me bring that up. We all had some exposure to music growing up. Ben in particular was the one who took it the furthest. Ben was the prodigy and the genius musically of our family. And if I'm getting this right, the French horn he started with had a pencil and a pen stuck inside of it. And so I think he was pushing more air through it than he needed to, and ended up on scholarship to the Colburn School downtown in L.A. So went from a very small town in Central Florida all the way out to L.A., and did his undergrad there, did his graduate work at Northwestern, and his PhD in Boulder, Colorado. And Ben is the reason I got introduced to live musicians. He's the reason I would come out here to LA with the little money I had saved during college and try to record live strings. I owe a lot to my family, and the environment my parents created musically in our home was pretty unparalleled looking back at it. We come from a family where I didn't really know my grandparents well, but they invested in our musical endeavors. So if we ever even slightly mentioned that we were interested in an instrument, I kid you not, they would appear at the door. Someone had mentioned they wanted to start learning piano, and so a Yamaha P22 practice piano just arrives on our doorstep.
Wow, that's great.
I know crazy, and I still have it in my living room. It's I like playing it more than I like playing my nice upright in my studio. So we come from that sort of heritage where my grandmother fled Germany after the Russians, quote unquote, liberated East Germany. And as a 9-year-old girl found herself in the New York public school system, under asylum, and had to restart her life, and was very mysterious but very committed to music. Was in the Miami Metropolitan Opera for 50 years. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever run into people where you're like, I don't know my relatives that well. There's not a lot that we have about them. But you just get it in my siblings. You get it in how crazy we all are and how creative we can be together, that there was something that took place in our generational history in the past that we're kind of living in now, but I don't know the real connection to it. I just know it's kind of like energy that we all feel.
Yeah, and I have to say, you're by the way, your story has a lot more left to be told here. I mean, you're very young. Your ability is through the roof. I do have to say, I feel like, and if I'm wrong here, please correct me. I feel like you're very hard on yourself. So when I research your life, right, I use I'm not going to reveal my secrets, but I use a bunch of things in finding out who you are. I'm just going through your IMDb profile. I feel like you're like, just hearing you talk and some of the things listed here, I feel like you're very difficult on yourself. I feel like you're your own worst enemy when it comes to being harsh. Is that fair?
I think it is fair. I have always felt like a wannabe composer. I never got trained classically, and I really regret that. I'm actually starting piano lessons here in a couple weeks because I don't know theory and I don't know chords well. And usually in recording sessions, I feel like the dumbest person in the room, the least qualified person in the room. Especially when I've been working with musicians and I'm hiring them or collaborating with them that day, and they're just geniuses, and they're lapping me in the session. I think a lot of composers can resonate with this, and I can't keep up with them. I don't even have the courage yet to play live, which is something I'm moving towards in the next 5 years, playing live immersive experiences with my friends. And I'm always the least qualified one in the room, is what I have generally felt like. And I've kind of felt like an imposter because I got into this accidentally. I feel like I got into music accidentally.
Oh, see, I mean, that might be true, but I don't buy it. I mean, I think your ability, that doesn't lie. Like, I mean, it's your work. I mean, that doesn't, my ears don't deceive me. And I've been around scores a long time. And I have to ask you, so we'll come back to that, but just take this wonderful song, and I'm going to go back to this too, Eyes Wide Open, right? So when I hear that song and I hear piano in the background, there's a lot of levels here. Is that you playing the piano, or is that a sample?
That's me. Piano is the one thing that I've really sunk myself into learning how to record, at least over the last 8 years. And I love the opportunity to mix the real sound into everything that I do. I usually will reinforce it with some samples at times. My piano tech actually created my favorite piano sample library out there called Keyscape. And that's his Yamaha C7 that I'll usually layer in with mine. But I have spent obsessively many years trying to figure out the right mic combination and the right way to get to sit in the mix. And maybe now, like just now in the last few months, have I figured out how I want it to actually sound. But yeah, Eyes Wide Open's definitely, that's the old Yamaha P22 right there. And that song took 2 weeks to write. When I wrote it, I was scoring a 6.5 minute promotional for Florida State University's fundraising campaign. Some friends had asked me, hey, we've got a low budget on this. Could you hop in and do this? And I watched the film and I just went, I like this, because it was about multiple students from FSU who were all pursuing different paths. So it gave way to have different interpretations of the same theme, almost like a miniature film score in a 6.5 minute period. So I sunk myself into it. I brought in guitarists, string players, vocalists. I sometimes do my own vocals as well. My wife, Brooke, she's got her own like ancient language she gets into. If I give her a couple glasses of wine, she just lets loose. And that song, when it finished, though, I remember having a lot of conflict about that song. In September of 2014, I looked at Brooke when it was done, and I said, I think this was the biggest waste of time musically. And she can quote me on that. I said, I don't like how it turned out. I don't like the mix. I don't like the master. It sounds harsh. It sounds tinny. It sounds predictable. It sounds like I'm trying to be M83. I'm trying to be someone who I'm not. And I didn't listen to it for about a year and a half. I gave it to MusicBed, my licensing reps, and I just tuned out and I checked out. And it is probably that or Emmanuel are the two songs that people actually know me for, which is kind of hilarious. And I'm just now getting to the point where I'm not embarrassed by Eyes Wide Open, and I'm learning to embrace what it is, what it's become. And in many ways, I owe my success to the guys who gave me the opportunity to score that film, because that song put me on the map in the licensing world and has led to a lot of custom scoring opportunity.
Yeah, and I have to say, and I told you off air that song inspires my fat ass on the treadmill, and I got to tell you, I love everything about that song. But you know what? I hear you saying, "Oh, failed as a classical pianist, this and that." But I got to say, man, to me on the outside, I musically I know a good score when I hear it. But I have to say, man, like when you put it all together, right, and you're playing the piano, you're doing those things. I don't know. I think it's more important, which you have these things, to have a good ear to figure out, okay, this sounds great here. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I think all that is more important, what you have, than to say I'm quote unquote a classical pianist. I don't know, man. I think you have what a composer needs versus, okay, I get that you want to become better as a pianist. I get it. I mean, I don't care what you do in life. You're always learning. I get that. But your gift, I think, Tony, comes in putting it all together and making it sound just like a kick-ass. I'm lacking the vernacular to properly say this, but I don't know, man. I just think what you have is a gift that cannot be taught. The way you put things together,
I appreciate that. The music is inherently mysterious to me because I go, where did this come from? I was listening to Max Richter talk recently. He's my favorite composer, hands down, of all time. His album Sleep totally changed my life. And he was mentioning that even as a kid, he would hear music in his head and didn't know how to get it out or what to do with it. And I would say, okay, I'm not like Max Richter, but many composers have had a similar experience. We all heard something in our heads, and I went, how do I get that out? I actually got to meet Scott Kirkland from the Crystal Method, which is probably my favorite electronic band. They got me into how to produce music back in the late 90s. And I got to meet him, and their album, when I heard it as a kid, I wasn't thinking I want to hear this again. I immediately went into how did this get made? Like, how does someone make something like this? And I really appreciate your comment about how I compose, because I would say the one thing I've learned to own and appreciate in the gift of music that I've been given is how to produce it. Like, why should this be in and why should that be out? Right? Like, it's not even about what are the possibilities here. It's about what is the best emotional possibility for this moment. And though I do love film music, and I love when I get to score films, I love the collaborative process, especially directors that want to take their time with music, which is becoming more and more rare. I like the ability to go, I'm going to make music that's going to outlive the film, hopefully, right?
Right.
I want someone to be able to stream this score and get deeper into their own craft. Because what we're finding now, since streaming has exploded in the last 7 to 10 years, is that people are putting together playlists of mood boards to help them create. So music is there as a public service now, whether or not it was for a film or for licensing or for whatever, to open people's internal worlds up, for them to find out more about who they are, reconnect with the part of them that maybe feels locked up, or for them to create. And the producing aspect of it, I'm just now coming to terms with, is this maybe more my gifting than composing? And I know I don't want to separate the two because I don't think they're separate, but I'm kind of having to start to ask, is the way I put it together maybe the real gift here? And what if I start working with other artists and collaborators in a room and acting as a catch-all? Does that make sense? Kind of acting as the filter through which all the ideas come through.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And you mentioned Max Richter, who's absolutely incredible. And I want to get to your influences in a moment. I got to say, so as I read about your life, okay, and maybe I don't understand fully, but and I don't want to sound insulting to house music, right? I feel like what you do is so much more than house music. But am I like underappreciating house music? Like, I feel like what you're doing is advanced, right? I feel like it's more than house music. And I feel like house music, and maybe it's just stereotypical and it's got bad, you know what I'm saying? Like, you hear house music, you're like, okay, that's the music that I heard at the club, or, you know, whatever. But
Right.
I feel like what you do is at another level. So when I read in your bio, you know, he fell in love with house music, I feel like maybe that's a little bit of a foundation, because if, again, you have many songs, but Eyes Wide Open, if you listen to that song, there's so many layers to that that I feel like house music doesn't have. Am I naive? Am I naive in that perspective, Tony?
No, you're not naive. I spent some time as a kid in South Florida, and then really did a lot of my growing up in Middle America and Central Florida. So me even talking about house music is kind of scattered. But I fell in love with house music because it's very hypnotic and it's very spiritual. When I am in specifically deep house clubs or listening to a deep house DJ, I'm mesmerized because they're hovering around 110, 120 BPM, somewhere in there. And the room is hypnotically glued into a constant rhythmic tempo that is actually correlating to the human heart rate when it's about to anticipate something. So the human heart rate is not necessarily super high at 120. You're not necessarily exerting energy. You're not exactly spending energy. But you're also not relaxing. You're kind of suspended in a position of anticipating something good that's happening, if that makes sense. And I've been mesmerized both with house music and then pop music. I listen to the top 50 every week, and I'm mesmerized by it because they're able to get very simple ideas lodged in your mind. Now, I'm not a fan of the shelf life of a lot of modern music. I'm not a fan of the heavily auto-tuned hip hop and rap music that has the shelf life of like 6 minutes and then we forget about it. But I am mesmerized by how producers are lodging melodies in our heads, and how vocals these days in popular music are often less about the meaning of the vocal, and the vocal's there to carry a tune. It's there to carry a melody. That's all it's there for. And a lot of great producers in the electronic world are locked into how to get you to remember something, right? Whereas a lot of film music and a lot of classical music, and I don't mean to be critical here, but a lot of people in the classical world just write music for the sake of music.
Right.
When I'm in a lot of writing sessions, a lot of the debates I have with my good friends in writing that drives them up the wall, by the way, I'm shocked they still want to write with me, is like, why are you going to that chord? Why are you changing this? If it's good, why are you changing it, right? And out of the gate, I just have to own that I don't like changing stuff that sounds good to me. I don't. I mean, I've written like 5 iterations of the same song over the last 8 years, and very few people care, if that makes sense. Very few people email me or write me or tell me in conversation, hey, you really need to change it up. They go, we really appreciate that you've stayed in the lane that you've stayed in. And my mantra, if I can say it, and I've been working on this for years, is to do simple things very well that lodge deep within your soul. And for some reason, house music hits me there. And all my friends have the same question you do. They go, what am I missing here? I go, you're not missing anything. Don't worry about it. You do you. But for me, it's house and EDM that sometimes draws that simplicity out the most.
No, and that makes complete sense. And, you know, you talk about your influences. When you watch a movie, is it possible to watch a movie without focusing on the score? So we went to go see Hans Zimmer, I think it was last year, and we were just blown away. Like, if I had my choice on whether to see...
Oh, where'd you see him at?
He was at either Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun. I don't remember. It's one of those two. He was at the casino, and he had this huge show. It was awesome. Like, it's just dark.
Did Zarina Russell do the Gladiator Suite?
Yeah,
Was Lisa there?
Lisa definitely wasn't there. I think it might have been that other person you mentioned.
Yeah, it was Zara. Okay.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't Lisa.
That was amazing?
It was absolutely amazing. And, like, he brought up songs that, like, I totally forgot he did that were fantastic. Like, Man of Steel. Like, if you ever want to listen to people can shit on movies all they want because people either love or hate that movie. But I'm going to tell you, that score is, you talk about out of this world.
It's one of the best, man. It's one of the best.
So can you appreciate a movie without saying, you know what, I love what he did there, or I love what she did there. I love the vocals that they added to that score. Can you appreciate, or are you always kind of the musician in you? Is it always like, you know what, I love that. I hate you're never focused on the movie itself.
I'm always drawn into the movie, and I'm more offended that the storytelling's off than I am the music is off, because what we have right now is an influx of high budget movies that have low impact and low memorability. So we have a lot of bad writing in the industry right now. We have a lot of content being made that doesn't need to be made. And we have a lot of dark, meaningless kind of evil content being put on VOD that I have more of an issue with how the stories are being told today more than I do with the music. Now, recently I've been on this in a place where I have not really paid attention to the score a whole lot. I've just learned. I'm really learning to appreciate and draw out the good that's in there. My friend Adam Taylor and I were just talking about this. Adam is an incredible composer here in LA. Just got nominated for an Emmy for his third season of The Handmaid's Tale. And we were talking about this the other night at dinner that we had just seen a film that a friend of ours, Elliot Rausch, made. And we asked the inevitable question when we both got in the car, what did you think about the score? And Adam's response was so cool because he's not a critical guy. And we had a great chance to talk about what we felt in the music. And both of us, we found ourselves, we're not sitting there critiquing the living daylights out of this score, which was done by a guy named Alaskan Tapes, but learning to appreciate what was there. And then we had the conversation, what would you have done? What would you have done differently there? So I got to be honest, I do think about it. I do process it. But at this point, I'm just trying to celebrate when there's good storytelling out there. And I am a firm believer that there's more than enough to go around in terms of work. But if you don't do a great job on a score these days, the likelihood of you not getting called back is very high. So I don't want to act like it's not a big deal, because it is. Now, in terms of, can I kind of answer a question you didn't ask, okay, which is, do I ever hear a score that makes me go, I am stopped in my tracks? That has happened a few times. Arrival by Johan Johansson.
I was going to say that. I was going to bring that up. I swear to God, I was going to bring that up.
It's the all-time. My wife used to teach yoga, and I went to one of her classes, which is a documentary in and of itself, watching me try to do yoga. You talked about you on the treadmill. That's nothing compared to me stretching and my breathing noises. But she played the Arrival song during the class. And it was so tribal and so human and so ancient. And I went, whatever Johan was tapped into in that last phase of his life is the perennial vein of a lot of us as composers and what we look to as to where the future of film music is going to unfold. But
let me just say this: I could talk about Johan forever, and his loss is like it's obnoxiously sad. But can I just tell you the song? I mean, that score is fantastic. It's your boy Max Richter on The Nature of Daylight that leaves me in a puddle. Like I'm surprised I could talk to you about this right now without getting emotional as we talk about it. Like that song alone. Like I have enough trouble just getting through it. I mean, that leaves me in a puddle every time I hear it.
Every time.
I'm telling you. I mean,
and Max.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no! I love this. Max and Johan together in that score made it what it was. The movie would not have been what it was without On the Nature of Daylight, playing up front, and it would not be what it was without Johan taking the risk he did when it came down to the vocals, how he made human voices. The play on the whole film being about language. I mean, it was definitely both and it's funny that you mentioned that song, because I was just talking with Rupert Colson, who's Max's engineer. I got a chance to visit with him at Air Studios in London, which is like a mecca. The place is beautiful. And I actually asked Rupert how they did the strings for On the Nature of Daylight, because it's so mesmerizing, isn't it? You listen to it, you're drawn in. It's not too shrill. It's not too soft. It's the right amount of everything. And he actually told me there were multiple string sections and sessions involved in that. I think they wanted to retrack some of them and layer them differently. It does sound like it's all in one room, though, and to me, that was probably a more perfect placement for that song at the beginning of that film. And did it also play at the end? Did it play at the end as well?
Oh, yeah. It plays. I mean, that's a huge part of the movie. Yeah, big time.
That's right. That's right. Okay, that's right. So that to me was almost a better placement of that tune than maybe the original intent that Max wrote it for. And that's what's crazy about his music, and it's different than Johan's in this, is that Max's can be used in multiple places at multiple times for multiple reasons more than any other composer's work can be used like that. He's just got this eternal quality to what he does And he's so humble about it, right? It's almost like, is he a film composer? Yeah. But is he also a composer? Yeah. But what he does is inherently visual. I don't meet many people who don't think visual things when they hear his stuff. And I went to his Sleep concert in LA last July, and met about 1,000 strangers. And then we all went to bed together, which sounds sexual. It's not. Don't worry about that. But literally met all these people. You meet them, you get a cot with your ticket, you bring your own bedding. It was outdoors, started at 10 p.m. downtown LA in Grand Park was the name of the park. And it's crazy because you're literally like, I would never have met these people at all had it not been for Max and the risk he took with music. But now you're collectively experiencing what a lot of us may call film music, we may call classical music, we may just call this is what we like listening to. And we're in a park downtown sleeping under a full moon, and Grace Davidson's soprano voice is echoing throughout the buildings of downtown LA. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but it's bringing us all together. It's hitting something at our core. And if this is the future of classical music, I have a lot of hope.
No, that is so well said. And it's funny that you say that, because I told one of my Chris Spellman, who did Lost City of Z, I said what you guys are doing is our modern day. You guys are the modern day Bachs and Beethovens, and I think he really likes classical music. He's like, shut up, get out of here. You don't know. But he said it in a fun way. But I'm serious. So like, I'll give you an example. So one of the composers I love this guy, is Thomas Newman. I mean, dude,
he's the Godfather. He's the Godfather.
And on the way home today from the gym, and I was thinking about our interview, like I was just listening to Road to Perdition. That came out in 2002.
Yep.
And I've worn out so many CDs from so many composers, right? But like, I don't know, that music holds up so well. And it's not just him. There's so many talented people. I don't know, man. I think there's so much to be said for composers.
No, we have to talk about Newman, though, because Newman, who wears the eternal turtleneck and the Wrangler jeans from Walmart and never does interviews, and we all wish he would do interviews. We should hit him up. Newman is actually the one that a lot of people in this town defer to for where they got their inspiration. And Newman's interesting because he's able to do something to your soul and your mind and your imagination without moving his hands very much. So, classical music, as I know it at least, is very busy. Mm-hmm. It's very moody. And it's going to have you here one moment, and then, 6 bars later, it's going to have you over here. And you're not able to really focus. It's not meant for you to stay in one emotional vein. Newman has done the same thing his entire career. He has, I think, a group of 7 or 8 guys and girls or whatever that do all the little dulcimer sounds and the little windy instruments. My friend Luca Tensio, who's an incredible composer living in Nuremberg, told me about this. That he has a team of 8 people, I think, that do all these little auxiliary sounds around him. And we all know Tom Newman by that piano sound, which I think is a Steinway D, and then his little bendy, wispy instruments that sound somehow Indian or Persian or South Asian, but he's the whitest guy in the world. And I'm like, how did that happen? How did that type of music decide, I'm going to camp out in this guy's turtleneck Wrangler jeans body, and I'm going to just do the same thing and bring it's a sense of comfort, isn't it? When you watch a movie that Tom has scored, it's comforting. You know that you're going to be well taken care of by his music, and you can relax. And it doesn't matter if it's Finding Dory. It doesn't matter if it's American Beauty, which how prophetic was that movie, by the way, with Kevin Spacey?
Absolutely.
And I hope it doesn't taint the score. The power of the score. But my go-to when I'm testing pianos, just so you know, because I tested for like 4 years before I bought one, was Thomas Newman's American Beauty Suite.
Wow.
Always. Yep. It's my go-to. It's where my hands naturally fall. And I dare say I even write what I write in the keys that I write because Tom Newman has been my inspiration. So he's kind of the lens and the filter through which subconsciously I write.
No, that is so well said, and your appreciation is pretty clear. And, one of the things that I feel bad for when it comes to composers is, so one of his best works is, I love the movie, some people didn't, and I feel like when people don't like a movie or they don't watch it or they listen to the critics, it almost like there's other people that suffer, one of which being the composers. One of the movies he did was Passengers, which has a great score to it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, but the movie's like hit or miss. I loved it, but people so I feel like in that way too, it's kind of unfair to composers too, because people judge the movie and it's got like a ripple effect to it, I think.
Yeah, and that was Tom's way of putting his foot in a little bit of electronic instrumentation, which frankly I don't think worked super well for him because he doesn't need it. You know, a lot of composers need the electronic thing to fall back on. Like for me, I start with Omnisphere. It's probably my favorite plugin of all time. I've been using it since the day it came out. I was like the third customer to buy it or something. It's made me a living. It's like my go-to. And Tom in Passengers was blending a lot of Omnisphere and digital sounds with the organic and acoustic. And I would almost say, I guarantee you the temp music for Passengers was Stephen Price's score for Gravity and a few other things like that, because I could tell Tom was put into a place that was stretching him. And I would like to hear more of that, frankly. But I just don't even think he needed it for that score. I think you just let Tom be Tom, and he's one of the few guys that you can just let him be him. Same thing with Zimmer. When Zimmer gets space to just stretch his legs and take time to do his own thing, I know a lot of people have opinions on Hans Zimmer and his workflow and the people who work for him and whatnot. But when he has space to do what he wants, especially his older scores, Thin Red Line, Gladiator, Beyond Rangoon, which gets no press and no hype, but he used Balinese gamelan instruments that were in this bizarre tuning. When he gets space to do what he wants to do, like James Newton Howard can do.
Yes,
same thing.
Good call.
Master of melody, man. And people, it's crazy, dude. Younger composers, when I talk to them, when we all get together, we can sometimes find ourselves critiquing these guys. But the truth is, what makes them good is when they do one thing well.
Right. Not
when they're this adaptive chameleon that can do 90 things, but when they can do one thing well and live in that lane and deepen it. That, you know, I'm not trying to make a thing about this, but if I go back to wine, when I open a bottle of wine, I don't really want to pay a whole lot for it, but I want it to be itself. I want it to do one thing really well. And I don't need it to transform every time I take a sip and be something different. I just need it to be good and for it to know where it came from and whose it is and what its purpose is. And when composers have 80 years to deepen their sound, like John Williams has done, like many other composers have done, and they hit their streak like right before they die, that gives me hope because it lets me know I'm 33. It lets me know I don't have to know right now. You know, I'm kind of in an identity crisis in my own writing right now, to be honest with you, in my own professional and creative life. And it's kind of nice to know that as long as I can hear, I think there will be space to figure a lot of this out. You know, who am I? What do I uniquely bring to the film music world?
Well, in my one bit of arrogance here, I'm going to tell you I had a writer come on my show who I raved about the movie I saw that he wrote, and he ended up winning a Golden Globe, and he won an Academy Award after being on my show, and that was Green Book, Nick Vallelonga. So I'm telling you right now, my friend.
I loved Green Book, man. My wife and I watched it. I was in tears at the end of it.
You have been officially blessed by the Monday Morning Critic, and I know I know, Tony, we've got big things around the corner for you, so I'm confident in that.
Oh man, you know what? I tell you, if anything ever happens with me and a career in this business, it's going to be because of the team that I'm around. I will tell you that.
Yep.
The musicians here are the primary reason I moved to Los Angeles. That's why Brooke and I wanted to come out here, because people out here think about music very emotionally, and they're obsessively deep in their one lane. Okay, so Pedro Eustache is a good example. He's like late 50s, I think. Very, very obsessive about his wind instruments. I think he moved to Armenia for a while. And studied duduk from the master of the duduk. And his duduk is the one you can hear in the original Lion King and the new Lion King. Mm-hmm. And any wind instrument he plays is going to be in, it's going to be in most of the scores you hear. And to find a Pedro who lives far north of LA.
Tony, you know what? I think, I don't interrupt you, but before I forget, I think he was there too. There was a guy.
Was he? Oh yeah, he was. He's got curly hair.
Yes, I think he was at that concert too, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, he was there too.
No, and he's on the Game of Thrones tour as well, which I was like, wow, you're on both of these.
We were at that
you have
too.
A life?
We were at that too. The Game of Thrones tour.
There you go. So him. Okay, he's like living north of LA. Doesn't really want to drive very far to record with you because he doesn't have to. He's just secure in what he does. Very humble guy. To find someone like that who's dedicated their entire life to wind instruments and to know that he's here in the area, I'm like, that's really what a composer needs. You really have to have people who can interpret those crazy ideas you've got and push back on them and go, hey, have you thought of it this way or this way or this way? So I am really excited to be here because as I'm kind of restarting my career and reinventing how reinterpreting, I should say, how I do music, any success in that realm is going to be directly tied to the people playing music with me, for sure.
Right. No, and I want to touch on that, but there's a couple things I wanted to kind of go through. You're absolutely right on Hans Zimmer. He is the godfather. Like, when he does a movie, it's like somebody comes into your house, kicks down the door, and says, I'm here. Like, when Hans Zimmer is doing the score, especially if you watch it in IMAX, it's like this man has announced his arrival and he's not, he's kicking ass and not taking, it's just, he's amazing. And I have to say, I don't know if it's just a fluke lately, Tony, and I'm going to mispronounce one of these guys' names. I was watching the movie Lion. I've seen it before. Yeah. And I've never heard of Dustin O'Halloran. I hope I'm saying his name right. But my God. Are. But like, that score out of the blue just blew me away. And another guy that does similar type of movies who works with, I think exclusively, almost it seems like, Danny Boyle is A.R. Rahman. Is that how you say his last name?
Yep.
Boy, those are two guys that, like, okay, so we've talked about the big, the bigger composers. I mean, there's so many great composers out there. It's almost overwhelming, I swear, Tony.
It's good, though. And Dustin, you're right. Dustin's very locked into emotional sensitivity and sensibility. And Satoshi Noguchi, who has mixed a lot of my stuff, worked on and mixed that score as well. I think he told me they had 9 different pianos on that one score.
Wow.
And in 9 different places, I'm assuming. And that journey of hearing how that was made is so crazy because it sounds like there was a complex journey to making it, but then you watch the film and you're in tears by the end of it, and
Absolutely.
you don't know that there's a lot of complexity behind it. AR for sure, like, man, that guy's a legend. I mean, like, he takes color, like the type of spice and flavor you think of Indian food and South Asian food, and puts it in audible form. It's like you're eating a meal when you hear his music.
That's so well said. Oh, that's so well said. Absolutely perfect.
We have a lot of people that are legends like that. And I know a lot of young guys that are so inspired by the people who have led the way, who did not grow up in the area. Some of the older guys did not grow up in the era of easily accessible technology. And I know so many younger guys that did, who are really working to find their lane and their sensibility in the industry. And the fact that we have a lot of these people to look up to, that we need that. We need guides. You know what I mean? And I think we're starting to see this beautiful transition into there are more composers, meaning there's more variety. Mm-hmm. And what we're having to fight against is sound alikes. One of my things, I guess, if you want to call it a soapbox, is like we have to find out who we are and what we're offering here, because we don't need another Hans Zimmer. I have a friend named James Everingham who actually just produced a score with Zimmer for a show that came out on Nat Geo. And James has every right, if he wants to sound like Zimmer, and would be celebrated if he did. And he's chosen to resist that and find his own path and his own lane in the film music industry, while working literally on Hans Zimmer's block at Bleeding Fingers, scoring this. And he's got to resist that temptation to go, I could do this. Nat Geo is wanting a score that's tantamount to something that Zimmer would do. They're expecting that. So how do I leave my own unique identity and fingerprint on this without ripping Zimmer, or having people hear it and immediately go, that's Zimmer? Or the comment a lot of people make to James is, you're going to be the next Hans Zimmer. And that's a lot of pressure for a lot of these younger guys who are growing up in this culture where they want to do this for a living, but they want to be them. You know what I mean? And I think we've just got to resist daily the pressure to have to fill someone else's shoes. And we have to enter into the unknown territory of finding out who we are. And that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of failing, and it takes a lot of 1 step forward, 3 steps back, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's so well said. And you know what? I sometimes wonder if I was a composer, like subconsciously, if you're watching a movie and you hear this great tune and you forget about it, like how much it affects. And let me say, like, I mean, even unintentionally, I don't want to say stealing somebody's music, but maybe influence, and you kind of forget about it, and you're like, when you're making your own, I wonder how much that happens too. And I'm getting back to your point too about the team effort. You know, that's such a great point, because I think when people say, okay, who scored this movie, you hear names like Newman and Zimmer, but what you don't realize, and like you've been saying, and especially with you, right, you have your own, people have their own teams that score, and I think people forget that sometimes.
Yeah, oh yeah. And it's gotten a little bizarre now to the point that one job I'm currently bidding on, the guy bidding against me is a legend who I've looked up to for a long time, and he's telling the director he can get it done in a third of the time with half the budget. And his response is, well, I've got a team of people who are going to do it for me. And so the producer's coming at me going, look, this guy can do it cheaper and quicker. Why should we go to you? And I'm going, well, because if he has a team do it, how is that personal? You know, you've spent 5 years on your film obsessing over every edit and every shot and every piece of temp music you drop in. What? Like, I get it. Yeah, if you could do it cheaper, you could. The question is, do you really want something to outlive your film? Do you really want someone to honor the story that you have chosen to embark on yourself? And I'm all for collaboration, but right now this thing has turned into a machine. There's so much content coming out, so much being produced right now, so much going on VOD right now, and so much of the music that is out there, like I said, with the stories that are just kind of not well written, not well thought through. So much of the music going out there is this digital sample heavy music that none of us as composers like it.
Right.
But it's alluring to get sucked into the trap of, well, this is better than not doing anything right now. Maybe I'll just do this. I'll get an IMDb credit. But are you really going to be proud to show your grandkids of that? You know what I mean?
Right.
So is it better to go broke for a while and write something that you care about, or is it better to do something for an IMDb credit that maybe you're going to have to apologize for in 5 years?
So, Tony, explain that bidding process to me. Is it like, all right, so like a state construction job where they have like, okay, the lowest bidder gets the contract? Is it, because I know some directors will go after specific composers. How does the bidding part work for a composer?
Well, man, it's okay. So I'm so glad that I met my wife before online dating. But the horror stories that I've heard about apps and online dating, that's how I would liken the bidding process to.
Oh, boy.
It's not enjoyable. You wonder what cards they're holding and not telling you about. You wonder if their profile pic is hotter than they actually are in real life. And you're just trying not to get screwed most of the time. I've gone through seasons where I've had management that has helped broker that process for me. I've also gone through seasons where I've brokered that process myself, and it's equally as unenjoyable because you're always the last guy in line with the budget. Usually you might have like, some marketing costs that are unforeseen after that. If you're a filmmaker, producer, director, whatever, but, in general, you as the composer are the last stop. And guess what? All the money is always spent. It's always gone. If I were to tell you in the last 10 years, how many emails have I got where someone says, we actually have saved budget for the score? It's zero. It's zero.
Wow.
And if you ask any composer, they're going to have a similar story for the most part, unless they're established, okay, unless they're kind of already in and they've got a relationship. So you're always the last guy, and they're always trying to feel you out as to how much you think it will cost to get it done. And no matter what you say, it's going to be more than what they actually have allocated or saved, okay? So you're already going to be more expensive just trying to pay your bills and pay your team, i.e. the musicians, the engineers, all that stuff. You're always going to be over budget. So the question now is, what story do I want to give up and lose money on to create meaningful music? That's kind of where we're at these days. You're either picking a project that might have a little bit of budget, but the story is kind of blah. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's something that you could tell someone in an Uber, oh, I did this, and they'd go, oh, that's cool. I know what that is. Or you're going to tell someone you did something and they have no idea what that something is, but it's meaningful to you and it's important to you. And you put a lot of time and energy into it and created something beautiful out of it, but you probably lost money on it. And that has been the case with every single score that I've worked on that has been meaningful to me. You usually lose money on it, but you're really happy when it's done. So that's been my experience so far. Not super enjoyable, but if you got to have a thick skin.
Yeah.
Because if you can't deal with losing money sustainably, if you can't deal with losing money in a sustained way for 5 to 8 years, then you should not be in this business, because it does not pay to be in this business, especially at the beginning.
Right. Oh, that's so well said. And, one of the things I was going to ask you was, I was going to say, if Denis Villeneuve approached you and said, you know what, would you take a loss on making the score?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like
I don't even know what the script is. Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? All you need, because people that know your music know your abilities, know how talented you are. But for the bigger scope, the bigger picture, all it takes is that one door to crack. You've done some great commercials, some indie, some other movies, But all it takes is that door to crack a little bit, and to get that one opportunity, which I would bet my life you're going to get.
Well, I really hope it happens. I don't know where it will come from. I do sense it will happen at some point in my life, and I'm patiently waiting, and I'm ready. I'm a time millionaire right now. We don't have any kids. I don't have any obligations. I stay really unbusy. Like, I worked until 4 a.m. this morning, writing music, and playing piano, and I slept until noon. And then I woke up today and had a phone call. I made espresso. I'm talking to you right now. I'm going to go hang with some friends tonight. And that's my routine. I stay unbusy because for me, it's very hard to write music that I really believe in, that I can fully give myself to if my mind is in a million different places. And so when I have conversations with directors nowadays, I go, you bring me a story you really believe in. I don't care where you think it's going to go, because it's probably not going to end up there. It's probably not going to make you money back the way you think it's going to make you money back. And I speak from personal experience. I worked with a team. We raised 1.7 or 1.8 over a 5-year spread to make a film of our own. That included a scoring budget, by the way, which they were very generous with. It's probably going to lose you money. It's not going to end up where you think it's going to end up. I just want you to believe in it, and I want you to trust me that if you have time to work on the score, we're going to build something beautiful. And those conversations usually are a dance of 6 to 8 months before we even get moving. Okay, so this is like watching a bonsai tree grow. And then there are going to be delays. And so-and-so is going to have to put their foot in it. That's a non-creative person that's controlling the process up at the top. And this thing's going to get delayed. And then all of a sudden, we're going to have less time than we thought. And so the ride is always non-linear. And for me, I'm not necessarily looking for a break for something big and notable that's Hollywood-esque. I'm just looking for a director that really wants to take their time on building memorable music and good music and emotional music. And honestly, that's willing to help raise money with me to get it done. The big conversation I've had in the last, I would say 25 jobs that I've had that have all been, that have all fallen out from underneath me, have all fallen out successively in a row because of budgetary concerns. And they basically asked me to do them for free. And I've just had to tell them, guys, it's not that I need to line my pockets with this. It's that when you hire a composer, you're hiring a team if you want it done right. And if you really believe in this, as you say you do, and if it's really a passion project, as you say it is, then let's go raise the money to do this together. And let's just revisit this in a few years after we have the money. But very few people really want to do that. They just want, music that's made right now on the spot. And that's just not me, man. That's not how I'm born. That's not how I'm made. Props to composers who can do that. I don't want to knock them, but that's just not me.
Yeah, so let me ask you, if we have a conversation 5-10 years from now, where is it? Where do you want to be? Where is the specific? What do you want to be going on? I get, the big projects. I get that. But specifically, Tony, where would you be happy if you were at in 5 to 10 years?
I want to score one film a year.
Yep.
I want to take 3 to 6 months to score it. I want a month off of rest and Sabbath for my soul. And then I want to spend the rest of the year writing immersive instrumental experiences for people to unlock them at the core. Some of that can be used for sync, of course, but the larger project that I'm working toward with a team is playing live pieces of music, multiple composers, in spaces that are both inspiring, places like cathedrals, caves, caverns where we projection map visuals on the wall, and then also places where people are underserved. So the penitentiary system, low-income housing districts, people who have not had a chance to have something in them unlocked yet. And I want to go play one of those once a year. And I want it to be a ticketed but free event. And I want people to bring who they are, where they're currently at, whether or not they bring their sketch pad or their laptop or their yoga mat or just whatever, show up and soak in it. And I want people to be invited into an evening of music for 5 to 6 hours at a time, where they're just allowed to have something unlocked, and the soundtrack is there serving something in them that has space to come out and play. So that's me in what did you say, 5 to 6 years?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Five
and I will be there. That's it. It's a very clear vision. Like, I know we're going to be there. There's going to be a lot of work to get to that point, but it's going to happen. I see that. That's the only thing I see clearly. That's it.
And you mentioned earlier in the interview, I think you said he was a close friend, Adam Taylor. Do I have the right name?
Yeah, Adam Taylor.
Yeah, so he did a wonderful job with Handmaiden's Tale. Absolutely, you mentioned that. Now, do you collaborate a lot with your friends? I mean, is the community of, I want to say, it's more musicians, I should say, and composers. Is it more like, it's, like actors bounce ideas off each other, but there's also actors that, don't want you touching their style, touching how they go about their process, whatever. Is it like that with composers? Is it like giving and help and teamwork? Or do you find some people that are like standoffish and, no, I'm good? Is it a mixed bag? How does that work, Tony?
It takes a lot of internal work to really know yourself, a lot of security to be able to collaborate with anyone. And I speak from someone who is learning that right now. And it's very difficult to collaborate with composers. It's not hard to collaborate with musicians who kind of need some boundaries to run within, if that makes sense. Like if we think of bowling alley, they're like, just give me some boundaries and let me play.
Right.
And hopefully we hit some pins at the end and we have some fun. Okay.
Right.
Composers is very different, because the minute you bring an idea up, the composer in the room that you're collaborating with is immediately thinking of how they would change it. Does that make sense?
Right.
Not how do I serve the idea. You need a chef in the kitchen, and then you need a sous chef, and then you need line cooks, and you need prep people. You need the ecosystem working. And I have found zero success collaborating with composers. I'm just going to be really honest with you. I don't like the process. I'm not a fan of the process. I will not do that process ever again. It's just not helpful. And you end up with more confusion at the end of it with a very muddy, half-hearted attempt at music than if you would have just taken that idea and thrown it in front of some musician friends of yours. And guess what? Here's the beauty of that. Then the musicians become, in a way, composers. You cut those musicians in for licensing royalties and writing credit, and that empowers them. And down the line starts paying some bills for them, right, if the track ends up going somewhere. And they feel empowered and safe now to continue coming and playing with you and for you, because if they go into improvisation mode and they write something for you, they know that's going to be respected. And that's my mode. I find musicians that don't fancy themselves as composers, but have the capacity to go into that mode, and that's been a lot more productive for me. I prefer to be friends with my composers, do great meals with them, have great conversations with them, but we don't mix business with pleasure, if that makes sense.
No, that sounds like the healthy way to go about it too. And I have to say, for those of you listening, it's funny how I stumbled upon you, Tony, because I was watching a trailer. For those of you that are listening, it was the Tom Hanks "A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood," Mr. Rogers trailer, and I was listening to the music. I'm like, my God, this is a fantastic trailer. This trailer music is amazing, right? So I'm listening. I go to the comments, and everyone says, "That's Tony Anderson. That's Tony Anderson." I said, I got to find Tony Anderson, because it's not like one person just like randomly said, okay, this is Tony Anderson. It was comment after comment. They go, that sounds like...
I need to go read these. I'm going to comment on these. This is going to be great.
So it's like, that's Tony Anderson. So I go, and I listen to Tony Anderson. They said, that's Eyes Wide Open. I go listen to Eyes Wide Open. I'm like, that's the song. I go, I'm gonna go talk to Tony. I want to get him on the show. I'm listening to a lot of his work. I love it. So it turns out, and I'll let you finish the rest of the story, that it was not Tony Anderson, but boy, does it sound like Tony Anderson.
God, man.
So I don't want to put you in that. I don't want you to say anything you regret, but I'm just going to say it sounds an awful lot. Like, they took in my opinion, this is me talking, they took the beginning of the Mr. Rogers show, It's a Beautiful, like the theme, and then they took that part and they glued your song onto it, and there you have the trailer. That's what I think, but what do I know?
Eyes Wide Open. Well, look, I wouldn't be shocked. Eyes Wide Open has had, to me and my buddy Jason have tracked down a lot of these because they've been sent to us by fans of mine or listeners of mine or whatever. Hey, this is a sound-alike of your song Eyes Wide Open. We've tracked down at least 25 of them.
Wow.
And about half of them have admitted theft. The other half have said, I don't know what you're talking about. We actually have an income stream from sound-alikes from that many people who have ripped off Eyes Wide Open, and we get quarterly checks, and we go write new music with that money, to be honest with you. It's not something I take lightly. I'm very serious about that, but Eyes Wide Open had a lot of sound-alikes. It went out a lot because of MusicBed's marketing strategy for that song when it came out on the site back in 2014. They're my licensing reps. But I do want to say this. The way I met Adam Taylor, and this won't sound connected at first, but it is because I accidentally ripped off one of Adam's songs in 2010 or 2011. Had no idea what I was doing, ripped the chords completely. And had no idea, and published that song. That song is called Rise. And, I found out years later that Adam had already written a song prior to Rise coming out that was an exact replica of mine. And whether or not through osmosis, intentionally or unintentionally, I ripped it. And Adam reached out to me, and we talked about it. He said, look, I know that you did this. I want to let you know I've made peace with you on this. And he actually donated to the film project I was raising money for. He would not like me saying that, but his way of dealing with it was actually to give more to me. And that birthed a friendship that to this day is like the strongest thing you can ask for in the professional industry, because he didn't shame me for stealing. He just gave me space to admit it. And I said, you know what? I did do this. I don't know how it happened, but I did do it. And how can I make it right? And Adam didn't want money. He wanted me to have more space to compose and find out who I was. So, yes, did it happen with Mr. Rogers? Yeah. Are there a million sound-alikes? Yeah. Do I own the chords? No. Hell no. No one owns chords. But Eyes Wide Open had a unique mixture of tones and a softness to it that I kind of laughed when I heard the trailer. Like someone probably temped in Eyes Wide Open and they ripped it. But now I'm learning to take it with a grain of salt, and I hope I get to meet that person. And extend the same kind of grace that Adam extended to me.
So, did you hear the sound the trailer before I told you about it? Did you know about it before we?
No. I went, oh, cool. MusicBed did a placement for me on Mr. Rogers. That's cool because I love Tom Hanks. I think Mr. Rogers is a bit odd, to be honest with you. My grandmother went to college with him. She can confirm the same thing.
Oh, very cool.
But to be honest with you, I listened to it after you told me, and I just started laughing. Bro, because it's happened enough, and anyone in this industry knows it's going to happen at some point. But you know what? That's what you get for simplicity. We're in a day and age. I don't want to make this a long thing. We're in a day and age now where you can literally sketch chords out, hit print, publish it. And your song is literally just chord progressions. That's it. And I got to be honest with you, I worked hard on Eyes Wide Open to not make it that. But for the most part, you play those chords, and any one of my friends, they're going to go, that's Eyes Wide Open. And they're going to say that because those chords became memorable at that time in that particular fashion. And yeah. So through osmosis, through theft, I don't really care. I just got a kick out of it. And I'm going to go respond to each one of those YouTube.
Yeah. And I want to say, and I want to say, like, we're making light of it now, but this is absolutely your life's work. And this is something you poured your heart into. Like, I can't even imagine the time involved in creating something like this. So when people kind of take and use, it's the same thing behind, the piracy in the movies thing, right? I mean, it's, you're technically they're reaching into your pocket and plucking out, it's like, it's great. I mean, I got to tell you, it also sounds like this, not to shift a little bit, my ADD's kicking in, but it sounds like you have to, in life, everyone has to have, like you mentioned, Adam, like that type of person in your life, because it sounds like people could have gone a different road when you took his, but he kind of went down, he took the high road and is just a pretty solid dude.
Yeah, and Adam is very secure in who he is as a composer. Adam doesn't listen to other music, when he scores. because he doesn't want osmosis to make its way into what he's doing. He's very disciplined, and I respect the hell out of that guy. And you're right, unless you have an experience like that where you become aware of your theft, whether intentional or unintentional, and someone extends that level of grace, you don't know how valuable it is to be in this industry doing what you do for a living. And so it really has informed how we deal with sound-alikes now. We reach out, we give them an opportunity to explain themselves. No one wants to admit it at first. The hilarity of that whole situation is Rise, my song, was in tons of legal trouble because several other bands then ripped it from me after that. And people tried to tell those people who ripped it that they were ripping me off then. And we got into several legal disputes, and I had to just say, look, I stole it from Adam, so go back to Adam. You know, like if someone's going to benefit from this, they need to benefit Adam, you know? And so we let it all go. And that it's funny because you put energy into a song and it takes on a life of its own, but it really does. It's important that you are locked in with what it is and you're confident in what it is and that it's got an originality to it. Because people will find it in this day and age, and Google's algorithm will tell the truth about it. And I'm to the point now where we just have recruited a musicologist, I'm being honest, who can listen to stuff that I release before I release it, before I even produce it in many times, in many ways, because you just can't be sure. There's so much music going out these days. I mean, literally millions of pieces of music daily hitting Spotify. And, you know, everyone wants to sue each other. There's very little conversation, very little healthy conversation in the music industry. And a lot of it's driven by fear now because so many people feel like they're getting taken advantage of and screwed.
Right.
That the energy out there is largely driven by fear. So well, I'm doing my best to cover my bases, and I am not going to pursue the Mr. Rogers thing. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is.
No,
just to be clear about that.
That's well said. And you know what? Katy Perry, I think, just lost a case, too, where, you know, it almost seems like it's really hard to Tony to lose a it seems like if people don't admit it, it's a long road that just to go down would just seem to just be very zap you of all the strength that you have, you know. Do I want to take my energy to track this down and be proved as the victor, or do I want to just write more music? You know what I mean? Yes.
And so it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I can let it go. And usually my wife is the litmus test on that. If she feels that it's a waste of time, she'll be very honest with me, and I just trust her read on the situation for sure.
So you mentioned a term I've never heard before. Like a musicologist is a thing. Like I feel like an idiot saying that to you. Like there's people,
No.
There's people that are so well educated in soundtracks they can tell you, wait a second, that sounds like Thomas Newman's, you know, movie in 1990. There's people that are out there that are like that are paid to know all that.
Yeah, well, the best ones are your composer buddies. Like I said, I don't love create. I don't love creating. I don't love creating with them. But a good litmus test is sending this to your buddies and going, hey, am I stealing something? And people will tell you right away, yeah, Tony, you're stealing Thomas Newman. I'm going, damn it, you know. Now I got to rewrite this. Or, hey, that's the Man of Steel theme. Okay, wow, crap. I thought that was familiar. Now I know. Now, there are also professional musicologists, and I have friends who are in school for this, who study the nature of composition and the history of music. Wow. And they're able to help you identify not just the style of music and the vein of music that you're in, but also, hey, have those compositions been used before in the past? Maybe we can learn something here. The great ones that I have come to know and work with are the ones who and these guys cost more, I'm just being honest. They will actually listen to your stuff and analyze it and tell you how close it is. They do this legally because so many court cases are up nowadays between people who are saying, you stole this from me. And there has to be law in place saying, well, is it the top line or is it the chords? You know, how many notes of the top line were replicated here? And unless you've got someone on your side who is covering your bass, all your bases, I should say, and you're just slinging things out into the ether, the likelihood of you ripping someone off and not knowing it and then them coming after you, especially if you're established. I'm not necessarily in the vein of like people would perceive me as a threat here, but if they see that you've got several million views on YouTube for one of your tracks, they're going to come after you because they're going to go, oh, they're monetizing on my idea. I'm going to make a court case out of this. So I just do it for best practices.
No, man, and your honesty is so refreshing. Let me I have a few more questions for you, Tony. Thank you for giving me over an hour of your time. Like, I can't even thank you enough. So there's like certain, like, I don't know if you call them groups or yeah, I guess they'd be groups that like just do like trailer music. I'll give you a couple names, like Two Steps from Hell, X-Ray Dog,
yes.
Audio Machine. So I'm confused. Like, are these just trailer people? To trailer people. That sounds ridiculous. Are these
that's amazing.
Musical
Trailer folk.
Yeah, trailer folk. Yeah.
Let's start a company called Trailer Folk. I will totally endorse that.
It totally sounds like that sounded different than what I meant it to sound like. So, yeah.
It's all right. I lived in Kentucky for 9 years. I technically was Trailer Folk, and I embraced them, and I am one.
So like, is that all that these? I named 4 or 5. Is that all that they just do? Is just trailer music, or do they compose as well? And what is that like? I mean, they're very talented, but they don't do it like you do, right? So, what do you know about them, and how does that process work? Yeah.
Trailer music is stunning. Two Steps, Nick and Thomas. I came across them when the first Star Trek trailer came out back in 08 or 09. Their tune was like so heavy hitting. And I know Thomas Bergerson does his own solo stuff as well, and he's phenomenal. So Thomas does write his own stuff. Nick Phoenix actually does a lot of sample development with East West, which is a company that makes a subscription-based sample library for a lot of composers. And for a while there, they were the trailer guys when trailer music was epic and lots of choir, lots of brass, lots of big drums. Then we saw a big transition in 2010 when Inception's trailer came out. You remember this?
Yes.
It was Zach Hemsey, and you had these brass hits that were just so iconic that are still being ripped off to this day. I would honestly say if anyone has influenced trailer music in the last 10 years, it's been one man, and his name is Zach Hemsey. He is the guy that got editors to move everything to a single hit system where we had timed hits and moments of brevity or dialogue or whatever that would come back to a stable bass, a predictable bass. And Zach really, I think in many ways he was put on the map because of that track. Since then before then and then since then has had several successful short films he's composed and does his own actually hip hop stuff, which is crazy. I think he's like off the grid, no social media, up in New Jersey doing this. Zach would be a good example of someone who's versatile there, but the trailer people generally tend to stay there when I've asked them, and I'll tell you why. It's because if they get a good placement, they get a lot of money for that. They get a lot. And they just want to stay in that space. They kind of get known there, just like licensing guys can stay there. I got known as a licensing guy when MusicBed picked up my catalog in 2012. And I had 10 years of experience prior to that. That was what I consider to be an absolute failure because Hans Zimmer and his people said, your stuff is shit. You can't intern here. But when I gave it to MusicBed, it found a commercial home in licensing. And I want to score films. I want to do that every year. I don't really get the opportunity to do that for a variety of reasons right now. I want to, but I've been pegged as a licensing guy. And so I have actually put a lot of my energy each year to doing licensing tracks, just like the trailer guys are doing that, just like film scoring guys live on film scoring. I think once you find your vein, it's hard to break out of that because people then know you as that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back up a little bit, Tony. Go back to the Stuff Is Shit comment again. What happened there?
Oh man, that was a thing, man. In 08, I visited Ben out here in LA.
Right.
He was doing his undergrad, came out to record some of his friends, and a buddy of mine said, "Hey, I actually know someone who works for Zimmer. You have any interest?" And I'm like, in college at this point, I was graduating at the end of that year, and I had no plan. And wasn't a great student, but was still producing and composing a lot at night, avoiding my homework, working late into the night writing. I was like, this is actually what I want to do. I can't believe you know someone who works for Hans Zimmer. I borrowed one of my brother Ben, one of his friend's cars, drove to Santa Monica at 3 a.m. It was before iPhones. Literally had to write the directions on a map or on a piece of paper and drive out there. End up at Remote. My friend Noah Sirota, incredible composer, lets me in the door. He was the friend of a friend. Gives me a tour of the entire space. I'm sitting there holding Hans's handwritten score for The Last Samurai in my hand. I'm holding Black Hawk Down in my hand. I'm looking at the fact that they just finished The Dark Knight. I think they were starting Tron at that point. They had just finished Frost Nixon. I'm like kid in a candy store. Lisa Gerrard had just done a session there that night. I think she walked out as we were walking in or something like that. I'm like smitten. And Noah was like, look, man, this is crazy. And if you really want to get into this, it's going to cost you a lot in terms of your own schedule and your own time. He's like, but I could put in a word for you if you want to do this. You know, you'll have to send your CDs in because this is pre-Dropbox, pre-Google Drive. Send in your resume when you're ready to actually move out here after you've graduated, and we'll see what they say. And I sent my CDs in after I graduated with a note telling them that I was willing to drop everything to come out there and work at remote control, to do anything. I said, I don't care if I'm pulling overnighters, making coffee for people, scrubbing toilets. I don't care. And I called about 30 times in 30 days, which I don't recommend, by the way. I think it would have been more easy to just fly out there and show up and have a conversation. And finally, I hear from the management, look, no, this stuff is shit. We don't have any space for you. No. And honestly, if you keep calling, we're going to blacklist you. So don't. Now, I don't even know if they have the power to do that. I don't even know. I was just scared shitless. And I was devastated at that time because I was willing to do this for a living. And I kind of folded inward at that point and decided if it's not good enough to even be a toilet cleaner at remote control, is it good enough for anyone? And actually quit a year after that. And my friend and I started a nonprofit film crew, you know, for a while. And scoring got rebirthed through that later on, of course. But it was a heavy hit, man. And without it, I don't know that I would be who I am today, for sure. I was actually just talking to Zimmer's engineer, Alan Meyerson, about this the other day, because we were talking about mixing one of my songs, and Alan is for sure the sound behind Zimmer, right? He's the reason Zimmer sounds the way it does, and why those hits sound as good as they do, and why the Tron Legacy soundtrack is so badass, right? And we were laughing about this, and he's like, I can't believe they told you that. And if I can say this without knocking their structure over there, the funny thing is, had I been taken in 2009, I would have given my life for them, and I don't know that I would have owned any of the master and publishing for anything I wrote for them. I don't know. That seems to be the story, is a lot of guys go in and work, and they do work for Hans or Lorne or someone that's there, and they don't get the right credit. That's kind of the word on the street. And they do get paid a salary at times, annually. But they don't walk out of the gate with their own M&P, right? So they have no intellectual ownership of what they wrote. They wrote it for Hans. And at the time, it was not a gift to me. It was a curse. It was an arrow shot straight into my heart. But now, I can honestly say I own over 95% of master and publishing on everything I've written. And I have more creative control and a lot lower stress level and a lot more mobility. So yeah, pretty crazy.
Well, I'm going to say this, man. My knowledge about movie scores is impeccable. It's not like yours. It's not that deep, but it's way more than the average moviegoer. And if your stuff is shit, then I'm going deaf, because I mean, I don't know, man. Well,
hey, let me send you the stuff that I sent them in 2009, and then you'll see what I'm saying. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Noah is the reason that I got better. Noah emailed me back and forth and critiqued my stuff. So without a Noah who's there, who's helping you figure out why your stuff does sound weak and how to make it better, you don't know how to. And Noah was like an older brother to me. Adam was an older brother to me. You know what I mean? And in that ecosystem, without those two guys, I don't know that I am where I am today.
Yeah, but there's also ways of telling people things. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's other ways they could have phrased things. I mean,
for sure.
It's how you deal. I mean, the whole battle of life is how you treat people, how you deal with people. Even if you want to say what's on your mind, and believe me, I'm very blunt about how I feel about things, but that's just a shitty way to kind of approach another human being. That's pretty awful, I think. Even if your stuff was shit, like back then, why would you even ever want to like just destroy somebody's dream. Like, I don't know.
Oh man, yeah, that. And I was not secure in the vein I was writing at that point either. I was trying to be a lot of different people at that time, and it's only now, like I said, I'm 33 now, that I can start owning my little lane and my little space in music, which is a mixture of ambient, somewhat electronic, very piano-driven, intimate, feeling-based music, largely instrumental. I don't work with a lot of vocalists right out of the gate, and it's always informed by the solo players that I bring in. But it's simple. Hopefully it's memorable, but it's very simple stuff. And I got to tell you, like, if it's taken me this long just to figure out the basics of what I have to offer, a lot of these younger guys growing up in the industry who feel like they need to have a career overnight, but they need to have all these followers on Instagram, or they need to have this career right out of the gate. That's the number one question I get is, how do I do what you do and make a living off of this? And I go, guys, there were 10 years before social media like really even existed that I was doing this day in and day out, trying to figure this out. And I didn't even, and that was a luxury to me. I didn't have the pressure you guys have. There was no metric that you could make it as a young person with a computer in this world. There was no pressure on me for that. Nowadays, kids are, 12, 13, 14 years old, going, how do I get to be like Deadmau5 or Marshmello or whoever the hell they found on YouTube that's scoring and making a lot of money off of ad revenue? Like, it's bizarre out there. And the reason I mention that is because this stuff takes time. It takes a lot of time to come to terms with who we are and what we have to offer. And my hope is that moving forward, my gift that I have to give directors is a solidity in my identity. And yeah, I'm going to be willing to change that to serve their film. That's the ultimate goal. But I want them to know that they've got someone who has got a unique gift to give their story. Does that make sense?
No, man. And that's exactly what I want. Like the fact that I'm interviewing, that's exactly what I want somebody to say. Like if I was a director listening to this interview, I want somebody that's saying what you're saying, because I mean, even and this is such a weird comparison, but even in the cheap world of like podcasting, I think you and I were talking about this off the air. I know there's podcasters that buy people that go on iTunes to leave positive reviews. They buy likes, they buy all this stuff. They buy guests. It's just that is the road that everyone seems to be taking. That is like the Instagram model. That is the DJ. That's the road that's the shitty road to popularity and likes. You're taking the one less traveled, man, and that's the one that's a little slower, but it's much more reflective of your work ethic, your talent, and that's the road. I mean, to hear that screams volumes about you as a professional, but also about your character as well, Tony.
Man, I appreciate that. I would love for you to come out and hang for a few days, and we can write some stuff. And I really hope that being here in LA really does open my mind up and push me out of my comfort zone. And I hope it produces some opportunity to do what you said, to serve some director's vision. I'm actually going tonight. My buddy Jens Jacob is hosting a movie night with local filmmakers and directors, and I am doing anything and everything I can just to connect with these guys, to find out what they're about, what drives them, what fires them up, and if I can click into their vision. And it's a total different model here, where I'm trying to go in with an idea of what I can give to these guys, opposed to what can I get from you, because I'm pretty confident that they're all dealing with the same struggle we are as composers, which is they're not given great budgets for their treatments and their screenplays. And they're doing their best they can to get the best product made. But we're all young and trying to figure this out. And I think the new wave of us that are kind of coming up here don't want to do this in the context of studios where we need to rely on them for creative direction and budget. We want to do this on our own. And I'm hoping that my time here will enable me to build some really long-lasting friendships and relationships with a director or a few directors, where we can build some trust together. Where we can get mad at each other and also celebrate one another on and off screen, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I really appreciate your words, man. And I hope that the slow growth and the slow burn that has been instilled in me by my mentors and friends really produces some beautiful stuff in the years to come.
Yeah. You've seen The Shawshank Redemption, obviously, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have your Red or your Morgan Freeman moment where you just, at the parole hearings, he's like, oh, I've learned my lesson. He eventually gets to the point where, you know what? I don't give a shit. This is exactly what I'm worth. This is my value. I'm not going to mince words with you anymore. This is exactly who I am. So my last comment to you, Tony, is this. Why don't you have, and I said you're not scared of this, but you want to get more comfortable in your abilities, I think. But I think it would be an awesome idea if you and a few of your friends had this like live concert, right? I think that'd be such an awesome idea.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I just got approached for the first time last fall by a group in London that wants to do this. They said, look, for some reason, a lot of the people that listen to your music, whether Spotify, Apple Music, whatever, they stream it from the UK. And we think we could do something here with live performances. Are you interested? I said, are you kidding me? Is this a joke?
Wow.
I said, I've wanted to do this my entire life. Are you serious? They said, yeah, we believe we could do this. Smaller venues, people who are really committed to coming out, and more of an intimate feel. What would you need? And I said, well, I would want musicians that I already write with to be a part of it. That's Chris Coleman on cello. That's Bonnie Brooksbank on violin. That's my friend Amanda Cook on keys or vocals or whatever. I want the team that I write with to be the team. I want my friend Stephen Proctor doing projection mapping, visual projection mapping. He did this in Iceland in a cave. He does it in Hawaii onto the ocean. He does it on rare Japanese paintings in Pasadena. Like, this guy is just like I want all these people together. Is that okay? And they said, yeah. Anything else you need? I was like, yeah. Are you kidding? Could we have other composers play so that it's not just me? They said, yeah. Who are you thinking? So the sky's the limit here. And really part of why I'm engaging in lessons is so that I can get my head out of having to memorize all of the music I'm playing, which is how I do it right now. I just memorize everything and get out of my head so I can look at the other musicians. Eye contact, I think, is important. And then also flow with where they're going. Because what I'm finding is when you get great personalities in the room with you, Chris is like this. I'll look at Chris, and Chris will flow into something with his cello that I'll just be like, what? How do I go there with you? Now that I've only memorized what I know, how do I go there with you down here? So I think I'm going to need a few years to get comfortable playing live, getting over my nerves. I think that's another thing, too. In the studio, you don't have anyone watching you. No one's analyzing you. You don't have anyone to perform for. You can fail as many times as you want, and you can edit it all out. But that is a big passion project of mine that we're going to make happen. And I think the initial run is going to be in London, Munich, and Paris, which are three really important cities to me, really important cities. So there will be more to come on that once we have more formed details. But I told the guy we need some time to practice and put together the show because this has to be done right. It can't come off the wrong way. So I went to meet with the Dolby guys the other night who are teaching engineers how to mix in Atmos. Westlake Pro Audio here in LA had the Dolby guys out, and then the guys from Genelec Speakers and Scott from the Crystal Method came out, and they showed us and let us hear what a song sounded like mixed in stereo, left, right, and center. And then what does it sound like in Atmos, which is you're not just hearing things in X and Y, which is left to right, front to back, but you're hearing things in Z, which is top to bottom. And then spatially, how does it move around top to bottom, left and right, front to back, all at the same time? So it's going to take a lot of planning to figure out how to do this and how to do it well, because how people experience sound in nightclubs and in concerts and in movies now is changing. And, the Beatles were the first people to mix an album in stereo ever, I think. And people thought it was revolutionary at the time. Now stereo is old news. People want more immersion. So how do we get them there? And if it took Max Richter's guys like a solid year just to build their system for outdoor immersion for his concert, because we're talking 800 feet back. We were sleeping in cots 800 feet back from the main stage. And it sounded better than it did being at the front stage. If they took a year to do that, I think it's going to take us a long time to figure out how to retrofit these spaces, especially cathedrals, which have a lot of reverberation in them. How do we get it to sound beautiful?
Man, that is so well said. And I promise this is the last statement before I let you go. There is a wonderful movie I saw that's not so much film. It is some film score. But I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Yesterday or if the premise of it, it's as if the Beatles never existed and there's only one guy that remembers what the songs were.
No way! I need to see this.
Oh, dude! So I'm not going to ruin it for you, but watch when you get a chance. Watch the trailer for Yesterday. Man, I'm not going to bore you with it, but just that's a movie I think as a musician you would absolutely appreciate. I'm just
okay.
I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
It's on my list. I'll watch it tonight, man. But look, you're incredible, man, and I think you're giving space for composers and young, up and coming, or established, whatever realm you find yourself in, to simply get out and find some community. And I'd say that's the number one need for most of us is connection with the outside world. And with what happened with Johann, I don't know if it was suicide or an overdose or what it was, but there needs to be a larger conversation on mental health.
Yep.
And human connectivity with a lot of us. And I think we can feel at times like we're the only people that care or give a shit or honestly, sometimes I feel like we're the only people that can exist because our minds can get so narrowed. And so I just really appreciate the work you're doing, the fact that you would seek any of us out and give some time for us to chat. It means a lot for me, man. It's like a love language to my soul to be able to have a conversation with you, man.
No, you're too kind. You're a good dude. His name is Tony Anderson. He's a musician / composer. Remember where you heard him first. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show today.